welcome back to another video. This time it will be Nagahama Neru's photo book that I will critique. And I was really hyped for this when it was announced, and even saw preview pictures like right the same day when I got this. I was seeing preview pictures already, and when I got it, it was a little late, so that's why I didn't record the video. So now it's been a day, so my hype has died down a little now that I actually have the photo book. So now I feel like I'll be able to give it more fair critique. And I do have to say, this is a real standout from the ones that we've seen recently, and you'll see why. And as always, I'm going to talk a little bit about the photographer. This photographer is Hosoi Kojiro, who has actually shot Ikuta Erika's photo book and has shot Saito Asuka's photo book. Now, I don't have Saito Asuka's photo book, but I do have Ikuta Erika's photo book, and that's one of my favorite photo books. So if it has that as a previous example, it really shows the style in this photo book. I think it shows a little bit more with Saito Asuka's photo book than it did with Ikuta Erika's photo book. I feel like Saito Asuka's more of the style of the photographer actually went into this book than it did of Ikuta Erika. But still, nonetheless, great photographer, and we'll see in this photo book how the style carries over. And also the photographer is also shooting Kita Harariya's photo book, so we'll look forward to that when that comes out. Now looking at this cover, we can see that this kind of alludes to kind of undressing, and I feel like this cover really helps accentuate what the photo book is about. It's not about undressing, but it's more about revealing, and this is revealing a different side of Nagahama Neru, which I think is super interesting to have this as a cover. Although the background isn't my favorite, I still really enjoy the lighting and the different aspects of this. And looking at the back, there's another aspect. First, we see the front cover where it's showing a new side of Nagahama Neru, and in the back we get a little bit more familiar side, so kind of saying, hey, there's a lot of new stuff here, but don't worry, she still is Nagahama Neru. And opening up, we can see there's a whole bunch of Polaroids from the actual photo shoot. There's actually some pretty good ones. This one I actually like a lot. I like this one right here. And even on the back, we get to see a little bit more, with maybe these three being my favorites. So it's a little bit different take. If we look at Sayuri's photo book, it is actually a little bit different because there it's repeated pictures of the same thing, like front and back. But then in this case, we get very much different photos, which I actually appreciate a lot coming from Sayuri's photo book. It's kind of like they one-up Sayuri's photo book. It's like, oh, you got some pictures on the front and the back? All right, we're gonna make every single picture different. So opening it up, we see a big wide shot, which are my favorite, especially like in scenic photos. We have her running through an empty street, and as we know, this is actually shot where she is from, so it's more interesting to see her in her natural habitat, so to speak. And as an opener, this kind of reminds me of the other photo books this photographer has done, so I think it consistently is good as showing the intro for a photo book, kind of like opening us to a new area. And then we see something I wish more photographers did, or more editors did, is this right here. This is actually more of completely covering the pages, leaving no white spaces, making everything in full view. And I really appreciate that, because then we get to see the image fully. We don't get distractions from white bars like we did at Sayuri's photo book. We get to see a little bit more of the face, and I mean, flipping it like this is no problem. You get to see everything clearer and bigger. And this photographer has done this before with Saito Asuka's photo book, and I feel like it carried over to this, and it actually shows that learning from little things, like maybe showing the image a little bigger or not showing so much white spaces, actually helps along the way, and learned a lot from Saito Asuka's photo book. And we also see there's a full spread page on 2 pages, and if you look at this, this is how it's done right. Doing this sort of wide portraits with the 2 pages is a really nice touch, because over here we get the detail of the train, and over here we get her with other stuff surrounding it. So it's not just bam, her face and then something else. It's more of her in the scenario, which I think this photographer does really well, which is why I really like Ikuta Erika's photo book. Next we move on to a little bit more fun ones. This one kind of makes it look like she's taking a selfie, or she probably is, and just walking along the street, and then turned around, turned a picture. This is just a nice little scenic one. That car kind of looks like she's gonna get run over. But on the next picture, it's more scenic because we get to see more of the environment and her being in the environment, kind of like her being in her hometown, and we're here to go and see her. And this right here doesn't bother me because it adds something to the foreground, which makes it more three-dimensional. It isn't that distracting as we've seen in other photo books. And here we have a photo of a wide. Again, I love when this photographer does wide photos of portraits because I think the photographer is really good at it. But in this case, I just wish it was straight, maybe like the lines weren't straight, so then when you made a straight, those lines are crooked, and this is like maybe the only way to make everything seem parallel. I understand that. At least keep the ground straight, and if the poles are sideways or crooked, then it kind of shows that this isn't like the most up-to-date place. But yes, I especially love how this is all green. If she was wearing something red, this picture would have been super nice because of contrasting colors. It's red and green. They're like the opposite on the color spectrum wheel. Now usually this type of photo would bother me. It's this one right here because this is like blurry. This is like background blur. And this is in focus. But I think it actually helps a little bit. It creates a little bit more of a story because if she wasn't doing this, then it would have been just her peeking out from the corner, and I would rather have her in focus. But since she's looking, kind of like looking, like finding focus, then this really works in that aspect because then you're looking for it, so it helps that she's a little out of focus because you're looking for her and she's looking for you. So it kind of complements each other and builds a story. With this one, the lighting is not the best. I feel like maybe if we look right here, that's an example of how the light is. Maybe using the lights to your advantage, maybe having a flash up there, maybe with like a diffuser on it, or maybe putting like a diffusion paper on the actual lamp would have made the light a little bit softer and a little bit more appealing to her. And I like how they got her like mid-tongue action, so it's really interesting to see. And plus again, including details from all around, kind of showing that this is her hometown. And here we have the cover image, but except with it being stretched out this way, I'm not a fan of this one. I prefer the cover because I feel like it's more about the person. This one kind of feels like we need an extra one, and I really like this image, so I'm gonna make a big 2-page spread of it. When I feel like this one doesn't really need a 2-page spread. I feel like 1 page would have been enough, and I feel like with the cover, that's enough of that. Like, it's nothing too extravagant to have twice. And I want to talk about this photo real quick because everything is very symmetrical with each other, because we get to see this line right here in the middle, we get to see her in the middle, and between her we get to see her hands in the same hand placements and her feet in the same feet placement. But thanks to this bush over here, it makes it asymmetrical with having symmetrical things in it, so it's a very nice touch and very nice attention to detail. And I guess I should talk about this one because this was a topic of interest with people and saying, oh, Neru shouldn't be doing that and stuff like that. Well, looking at the photo, I could see that this is very much with intention and this is with posing. It isn't so much like, oh hey, lift up your shirt, I want to see under. This is more of a posing aspect and more of an interest, kind of causing the eye to go towards the hands and then causing this area. Since it is lighter, as I mentioned before, we usually tend to go to the lighter areas of a photo rather than the darker ones, even though we do have to pay attention to the shadows. So with the eye going over here, we get to see a little bit more of the shape of Neru, and we get to see a little bit more of her aspects or her proportions. So this isn't really about like looting her up or anything. This is more about posing and showing a little bit more character. Because if she was just standing there with the shirt down and then just like that, it would have been less interesting than it is right here. I mean, it did cause a topic to come up and people talk about it, and isn't that what like art is anyway? Next, I'll talk about this one and the fact that I don't like where this one is placed. If you look back, it's actually the removing one, and then it goes to this one, and then it goes back to this with the clothes on. I kind of wish this one was the first one, and then we would have gotten to the other ones. Maybe this one right here, kind of causing like a little story of her looking at you and then getting ready to take it off. I feel like that would have been a greater story and would have made a little timeline in the photo book. Kind of giving off the impression, oh, you thought I was like undressing for that reason? Nah, we're just going to the pool. Now here's one I really like that they showed. It's this one right here because it is kind of like her in a shop that she recognizes, and with her being like this, it kind of shows that she's still a kid because at this place, this is where she was when she was a kid. So kind of bringing back that childhood aspect as well as some of her characteristics of being a little bit playful. And again, we get another one of these big shots where we see a lot of the environments, which I really like. And we get the first of the why isn't this sideways picture. And this one, I mean, I understand this one's like this, and then this one sideways would have been like, oh, okay, let me look at both. I feel like if you're gonna show this one, at least show it with this big one, maybe sideways, both of them sideways, and then we could have, I guess this order does make sense, like having her looking at the food, wanting it, and then her getting it, and then her running away playfully with it. But this white space over here, I mean, sideways, you're right, it would have caused a bit of distraction from this to this. maybe having a sideways one of these if you had it, showing a little bit more of the background. But then I see this truck right here, so I guess I could see where the mentality came from of having it with the white spaces. Even though they probably wanted it landscape, I feel like it would have been a little bit distracting. So I think in this case it's okay to have this photo like this. This photo right here is great. It's in the moment, it captures a great moment, and it's probably someone she knew, so it adds great emotion to the photo. And even though there's a lot of white spaces right here, I can see why there are, because as we can see right here, the bottom of the picture is right here. So I imagine they try to crop in as much as they could, but still trying to get her at a good placement on this page, but they couldn't really make it all the way. So I can understand why this photo would be like this. It's a really tough thing trying to get away from it. Like even if you show just this page alone, I feel like you're missing some elements, especially with this car right here. Maybe stretching it out a little bit bigger, maybe like this would have still worked out. But I do understand where they're coming from, trying to make it a whole image, kind of leaving it like you're in this big town, but then in this small moment you notice her, and like it's a small world after all kind of thing. But then looking at the next picture, maybe they could have done both of them sideways. That could have been an alternate decision. This one right here I like. Usually silhouette photos are hit or miss, but I feel like this one's definitely a hit because there's a lot of interesting shapes and we still know what's going on even though we don't see everything and everything's in shadow. And having this border go around her and having like a picture in a picture kind of thing, that's a really good composition and it's really hard to find in nature. And right here it's a great example of it because it's all the shadow and then light around the silhouette of Neru, and it's really good composition. Now we get into some more interesting photos, and I've seen this previewed when I got the photo book like a little bit before, so I was like, oh man, are we gonna see a lot of these? There aren't a lot of these, but the ones that they do have are a little bit more photography wise tasteful than they are like just blatant out there. This one, for example, is really good because the light is coming through over here, as you can see, and she's in the shade, so that's why she's the right exposure, but then everything else is blown out, and we can see the light coming through, showing the silhouette of what's behind it. So it's pretty interesting to see this. I've seen it done in other photo books. If I remember right, I think Nanoi's photo book had one of these, like different but like similar style, and I feel like something like this, it shows a lot, but at the same time it doesn't really show anything because there is a towel, so it kind of gives that illusion of like, oh hey, there's the towel, but then you get to see some of it still through, but not enough to say a lot. So it is still leaving it up to mystery and still causing people to talk about it. And this is where we start to compete against the Mayu photo book, because starting with this image, afterwards we get to see a lot of this. And I mean, first of all, I want to say wherever they are, the light in this place is really good, because as you can see, this soft kicker light everywhere really helps accentuate her and really just adds this nice dreamy or kind of like airy atmosphere to the photos. Now we move on to this image, and I'm going to talk about it because as we can see, it's a circle. When you first look at it, you think, okay, it's a circle, you know, a photographer wanted to crop in, make it a little bit interesting, but no, it's not actually cropped in, it's actually part of the image. Because if you look at the edges right here, you can see that there is an edge to it, and it is a real world object. Now the problem with that is that it does seem fake, since this is all like completely gray, maybe except for like a couple spots over here. But I feel like there isn't enough detail to actually see what it is. It kind of looks like a random cutout of a circle. So maybe doing a little bit more of an angle so you see a little bit more of the edge more, maybe would have helped out, because right here it just looks like, oh hey, I just wanted to make it a circle this time in Photoshop. Now we go to this one. This one's one of my favorite photos of the photo book, just because it says so much in one little picture. First of all, we get her hometown, and then we get her riding on a bicycle with her legs open, showing personality and showing a little bit more character in it with this environment, kind of showing like, this is where I was a kid, and then she kind of goes back into that world and thinks that way. That's exactly what this photo tells me, and just seeing it kind of makes it feel a little bit more nostalgic, even though I've never been here. I want to talk about this photo. This is dribbling a basketball. This is really just like a back of the leg shots. This one isn't that interesting to me. I do like the composition and everything, but I feel like if she was doing something else, it would have been a little better. I want to talk about something that this photographer is doing a lot with this photo book, and that's kind of like leading you one way, but then pushing you out to the other way. So in this case, we see her right here, and then the untying of the string, looking back at the camera, and then bam, in the water, kind of like leading you towards one place, like maybe like, oh, in the classroom, but then bam, it moves out to having some fun in the water. So it's kind of like tricking you a little, or kind of like pushing towards one way and then having a sudden twist, which I actually really like that they do, because you expect a regular photo book to go exactly straight on. And we actually have a story afterwards, and that's after, you know, she's swimming. She gets out, but she's dripping wet because she was in the water. I like this one because it's very contrasty, but it doesn't like look like Sayori's photo book, which is a little bit too much contrasty. It's enough where it still is interesting, but keeping the details. And then all this green really goes with all of this blue, kind of giving a different impression, especially with her barely being right here and then bam, being right there. Now I want to talk about this photo right here, because in this location of the bath, I feel like there could have been more done. There's like 3 or 4 images of right here, this spot. And I feel like maybe something like, oh, maybe like relaxing with the head up. Or I think we've seen it in other photo books where it's a little bit more S-curve. It's not as much as like, oh, hey, here's just my back and my head. It's a little bit more accentuated. But maybe we had to wait for the second photo book to get some more of that. Now I want to talk about these photos, because this one right here is very nice, because we have something in the foreground and we have something in the background, and it's her being in the foreground along with these plants, kind of having that 3-dimensional aspect, as I've said before. This one is just a nice one of her walking. I mean, clearly we don't see her face, but we don't need to in this aspect. We get to see a little bit more about the environment and her being in it. But then meanwhile, we get to see her turning around, giving this very unique face that we don't usually see from Neru. This one's a little bit more of an annoyed face, which we don't usually see. We usually see like a playful, angry one. We don't usually see this annoyed one, so I'm very glad to see this in there. I want to talk about my favorite photo, or in this case, favorite set of photos, which I really connect the both of them together. It's these two right here, and individually, they're not the strongest, but together, they become super strong. First of all, we get to see the sand being a little bit green, turning into this massive green stuff. And these logs piled together kind of make a walkway for her walking through the sand. Having this big transition coming from this light blue to light green to super green, and even spots of red over here, actually works really, really well. And this is my favorite combination that I've seen so far in photo books. Not in terms of solo pictures, but in terms of pages next to each other. I actually really like this. I actually like this more than I do with the Shinoda Mariko combination that we got with the low key and the high key images. This one really, really nice, really artistic, and very, very thought out. And here's another one of a really, really wide. And I also like the attention to detail in this, with her looking down where she is. Very, very nice attention to detail. And having everything symmetrical, always my favorite. Having wide, seeing the environment, favorite. And even though she's right here all small, we get to see over here where we get to see a saint, and we get to see the church and her running towards that way. I don't know exactly what kind of imagery this is leading towards, but this does actually say a lot in the form of just this image alone. But then adding this image over here with the nice glowing light in the background add more to the story. This image right here, always nice when we have dark green background and with someone in front, especially with this red little crane thing in front. That's especially nice, because as we see the red with the green, and this red helps connect you with the person because of the red lips, and then goes to the face, because as we know, skin tones are a little bit warmer, a little more on the orange scale of color, and against a green background, it actually works really well. Next, these are a little bit more emotional. I feel like they could have done a little bit better. Maybe like Shiraishi Mai's first photo book, it could have been done. I feel like these were a little bit more like she's on the bed, but then she started crying, and then the photographer came out and started taking pictures. These two right here, I actually don't like next to each other. I feel like you need to decide between one, because having these two next to each other and the different exposures make it look like a test print, and seeing like, oh, okay, which one looks better? Let's see, we need to pick between the two. And it makes it look a little bit cheaper because it's having two different ones right here. I say stick with one and pick it and decide on that, and just, you know, just stay with that one. Now these two right here are very special because, as you can see, there's a lot of white space, but I feel like that's intentional in this case, because if we see, the pictures are actually cropped differently than the other ones. This is how a normal photo is cropped, and then we have these photos right here kind of giving more of a movie aspect. And having these two as a movie aspect actually help create like a little mini story right here, with her looking on and then her walking towards the ocean in the sunset. it actually causes a nice little story. Even though this one was shot probably like later in the day than this one, it still helps with it. I'm just wondering how it would be sideways even with the crop. Maybe having like black bars on it to make it a little bit more obvious, I feel like wouldn't hurt that much. I feel like it'll just add to it if you have it like this, with this image right here on top and this image right here on the bottom. Even though you open it from over here, it still causes this one to come first and then this one after, kind of causing that storyline still. And I feel like this one's good enough to have it big anyway. And then we move to the final image, which is honestly the most negative thing I have to say about the photo book. This image as a finisher is not good. I mean, sure we have the emotion, sure we have the bubbles, sure we have the clothes, sure we have the environment. Look how blurry that is. Like nothing in this photo is in focus. Only like this bubble right here is in focus. Everything else is super out of focus, and you can see there's a little bit of sharpness added to this just to make it a little bit better, but that doesn't help. I feel like, oh man, if this was in focus, it would have been a good finisher. But because it's not in focus, I say go with your gut and go with something else. Again, this is super distracting for me as being the last image. Kind of like, it doesn't really help it at all. Last image is kind of what you remember because it is the last thing you look at when you finally close the photo book. So that's been Nagahama Neru's photo book. I actually really like this. It is top right now for me, like top 10 for sure. So who do I recommend this to? I actually recommend this to Nagahama Neru fans, Kiyakizaka fans, Idol fans, and I'd even recommend it if you want to have like a little bit more environmental, maybe like a little bit more about Japan and a person in Japan kind of feeling to it. It's very artistic in that way. It's a different type of art than what Katsuki's is. This one is a little bit more scenic and more eye-appealing, and I feel like they're different types of art, but they both are more artistic than other photo books we've seen. So again, recommend this one for sure to pick it up. Even if you're the slightest bit interested, pick it up. And I actually recommend this to everyone that's watching. If you are watching this, I recommend this photo book. Definitely really good. And not only is Neru good in it, the photo book itself and the photographer do a really well job, and the editor who brought it all together. Everyone worked really well, and except for that last picture, there's nothing too overly negative to say other than a couple blurry pictures in it itself. I feel like with the locations they had, they really worked with what they had, and other than like 2 locations, I feel like if there is a next photo book, they could advance more on those topics, and we get to see what comes more from Nagahama Neru. So if you did enjoy this photo book critique, you can go ahead and like it. You can leave your comments down below of what you think about it, and see what you think about it when you actually pick it up, because looking at it in person is 10,000 times better than looking at it online. So go ahead and pick this up, go ahead and look through it, flip through it. As you can see, there are some sideways images, so I feel like having it next to each other, especially the one that I mentioned, which is my favorite, that one really does leave an impact when you actually open it up to that page. When I first opened it up, I was like, wow, like this is super good. So yeah, again, recommend picking it up. And you can go ahead and subscribe to keep up to date with the new videos that I release, whether that's photo book critiques or weekly news videos. There are other videos I do as well, as you can see on my channel. So again, don't forget to like and comment and subscribe. You can even hit that little bell to keep up to date with the new videos. Have a little pop-up come up on your Google Chrome or on your phone. So I hope you enjoyed this photo book critique. I hope we learned a little bit, and I hope you come to appreciate the photo book a little bit more and pick it up for yourself. As I say every single time, thank you all for watching.